The Backdated, Episode 5, Chelsea Jane Doe, November 2000. A 16-year-old girl vanishes. Around the same time, roughly 300 miles away, in a parking lot in Chelsea, Massachusetts, just across the river from Boston, investigators find the remains of a teenage girl. They eventually catch her killer. He admits to strangling and dismembering her. He goes to prison. But nobody can tell you who she was. For almost 26 years, she is known only as Chelsea Jane Doe. This June, that finally changed. This is The Backdated. This is her story. Here's what makes this case different from most of the ones we cover. Usually the mystery is what happened. Here, investigators actually had that part. They had a killer behind bars who had confessed to what he did. What they didn't have was a name for the girl he did it to. For nearly 26 years, a family somewhere was living with an unanswered question, and a young woman who once had a name, a family, a future, existed in official records only as a case number and a description. Think about what that actually means for the people around her. Somewhere, a mother, a sibling, an aunt, a niece, spent 26 years not knowing what had happened to someone they loved. Meanwhile, in Chelsea, a detective's file just sat there with a photo of unidentified remains and no name to attach to it. Two separate kinds of not knowing on opposite ends of the same tragedy, neither one able to reach the other. To understand why that gap could last so long, you have to understand how these cases traditionally get solved and where that process breaks down. When investigators recover DNA, the standard method is to run it against the FBI's Combined DNA Index System, known as CODIS, a database built from the genetic profiles of known offenders. That works well if you're trying to identify a criminal. It does almost nothing for you if you're trying to identify a victim. As one forensic scientist involved in cases like this one put it, a 16-year-old girl isn't in a criminal database. She's not a criminal. There was never a reason for her DNA to be on file anywhere law enforcement could easily search. So for years, the case sat. Not abandoned exactly, but stuck, waiting for a tool that didn't exist yet. The tool that eventually broke it open is called investigative genetic genealogy, and it works completely differently than a criminal database search. Instead of looking for an exact match to a known offender, genealogists take a DNA profile and search it against public, consumer-style genetic databases, the kind built from services people use to research their own family history. Databases like GEDmatch and a newer nonprofit called DNA Justice allow anyone to upload their own DNA profile voluntarily. When a genealogist runs an unidentified person's DNA against millions of voluntarily submitted profiles, they're not looking for the missing person directly. They're looking for that person's relatives, a cousin, a grandparent, a sibling who happens to have taken a consumer DNA test and uploaded their results. From there, genealogists build backward, constructing a family tree branch by branch until one specific missing person fits perfectly into the gap. This approach only became possible because so many ordinary people started using consumer DNA testing kits over the past 2 decades. It's the same method that identified the Golden State Killer back in 2018, a case widely credited as the moment that proved this technique could work at all. That single case changed how law enforcement thought about DNA entirely, shifting genetic genealogy from a fringe academic curiosity into a serious investigative tool almost overnight. Since then, the FBI built out its own investigative genetic genealogy team, specifically because of how many previously unsolvable cases the method was capable of cracking open. It's worth pausing on how strange this is, if you think about it. The same hobby that helps people build out their family tree for curiosity's sake, tracing where their great-grandparents came from, turns out to be the exact infrastructure needed to solve decades-old murders and identify nameless victims. Nobody uploading their spit sample to a genealogy website in 2015 was thinking about cold cases. But collectively, all those small personal decisions built the database that eventually gave Tiffany Bradley her name back. But even with the right technique available, Chelsea Jane Doe's case still had one major obstacle: the DNA itself. 3 years ago, a private forensic science lab called Othram built a DNA profile from her remains. But given the condition in which her body had been discovered decades earlier, the sample was in what the lab's founder described as horrible condition. Building a usable genetic profile out of degraded evidence isn't guaranteed to work. It took specialized lab work just to get a profile good enough to search against those genealogy databases in the first place. Once that profile existed, the real reconstruction work began. Genealogists combed through the resulting DNA matches alongside old newspaper records, public records, and family history research, piecing together a family tree with gaps in it, trying to figure out where an unidentified 16-year-old girl who vanished in November 2000 might fit. Eventually, the FBI's team matched her DNA to a living relative, her brother. That match was the confirmation. The girl in Chelsea's cold case file had a name: Tiffany Bradley. On June 3rd, authorities in Chelsea, standing alongside the FBI and the district attorney's office, held a news conference to announce that Chelsea Jane Doe had been identified. Bradley's family was there. Her family described her as a joyful teenager who loved to draw, loved to dance, was involved in cheerleading, the kind of ordinary specific details that get erased when a person exists in the system only as an unidentified case for a quarter of a century. Her niece, at the news conference, called the moment a miracle and said it was amazing that after 26 years, people still cared enough to give her aunt her name back and return her to her family. Her aunt thanked investigators directly for not letting her, in her words, become a box on a shelf, for not letting her memory be reduced to unclaimed evidence in a storage room somewhere. The police chief who helped announce the identification had actually been a lieutenant on the force back when Bradley's remains were first discovered, decades earlier. He was there at the beginning of this case as a young officer, and still there in a much more senior role at the moment it was finally closed. Bradley's case isn't an isolated success story. It's part of a wider shift happening right now in how unidentified victims get their names back. Just last month, a body found in the Mississippi River back in 1975. A young woman who had been shot and was pregnant at the time of her death was identified as 15-year-old Cheryl Lynn Edwards, 50 years after she went missing. A team of volunteer genealogists working through a nonprofit identified her likely grandparents within hours of starting the case, then traced their way down the family tree until they landed on a daughter who had vanished from records back in the 1970s. Cases like these are becoming more possible not because the crimes are new, but because the pool of people voluntarily uploading their DNA to genealogy databases keeps growing every year. Each new profile added by someone curious about their own ancestry is potentially one more thread that can pull an unidentified victim's case out of a filing cabinet and back into the light. That said, the people doing this work are candid that the system remains badly overwhelmed. There are more than 15,000 active unidentified persons cases still sitting in the national database used to track them, and genetic genealogy work isn't cheap, often running into the thousands of dollars per case between lab fees and database access costs. Advocates in this field describe agencies being forced to prioritize cases with a living suspect, to catch over cases where the priority is simply giving a nameless victim their identity back. Underfunding, not lack of technique, is often the real bottleneck. There's also a harder truth embedded in why some cases take this long and others don't. Genealogists working these cases have noted that Black missing persons are historically underrepresented in genealogical databases, both because of lower participation in consumer DNA testing and because paper records for Black families in the United States often hit what researchers call the genealogical brick wall of slavery, a point before which formal documentation simply doesn't exist in the way it does for many white families. Missing Black individuals have also, historically, been more likely to be classified as runaways rather than properly investigated as missing persons. a pattern that can leave cases under-resourced from the very beginning. None of that makes Bradley's identification any less significant. It just means her case sits inside a much larger, ongoing effort, one where technology has finally caught up to a problem that used to be simply unsolvable, and where the number of families still waiting for a similar phone call remains enormous. 26 years is a long time to exist as a case file instead of a name. It's long enough for a police lieutenant to rise through an entire career and still be standing at the podium when the case he started with finally closes. It's long enough for a family to stop expecting an answer and keep hoping for one anyway. Tiffany Bradley has her name back now, and her family finally has what her aunt called the chance to take her safely home. If you want us to dig into another case like this one, let us know in the comments. This has been The Backdated.